With a razor-sharp mind, an abundance of wealth, and a mouth that rivals that of a seasoned stand-up comedian, billionaire genius Tony Stark and his alter ego Iron Man has been an obsession of comic book aficionados and everyday audiences for years. Iron Man's appeal derives not just from those oh-so-nifty suits, but also his spirit, his humanity, and the struggles that he has endured since 1963. Iron Man is a hero that many of us can identify with and relate to, and today we'll break down everything about TS from his origins, his allies, his gear, and his heart during this in-depth segment about one of Marvel's most beloved icons. Making his debut performance in issue number 39 of Marvel's Tales of Suspense in March of 1963, Iron Man burst onto the comic book scene with a flair and backstory that readers couldn't help but enjoy. Crafted by the brilliant minds of Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, Don Heck and Jack Kirby, Iron Man, as stated by Stan Lee himself, was partly based on pioneer Howard Hughes. His wealth and industrial spirit embodied in the character of Tony Stark and his company Stark Industries, lending him a plethora of resources and brilliance that provided the artists with countless story opportunities. Perhaps also a symbol of the dangers of capitalism, Iron Man was created during the heyday of the Vietnam War, where backlash from the public was in full force and the ever-growing movement of anti-war resistance was starting to spread throughout the country, a notion that resurfaced in 2008's Iron Man, when it was adapted to a more 9/11-inspired motif. It was a bold move to go against the grain and create a character that some individuals initially despised, but it was one that would pay off handsomely for Marvel in the years to come. Iron Man was created to represent the ideals that the youth of America was starting to reject. He encapsulated the idea of the American dream and the capitalist, war machine lifestyle, one that was challenged and, in turn, forced the character to undergo a metamorphosis that would turn him from billionaire arms manufacturer to ironclad savior. Lee also made it a point to integrate more humor and a cinematic touch to Iron Man in order to make the character stand out among the rest of the comics that were in circulation at the time, giving the comic a unique thumbprint that has carried on throughout countless iterations. It was a classic story of a bad guy gone good, and it was done in such a memorable fashion that audiences today still revel in the origins of the character. Released in March of 1963, issue number 39 of Marvel's Tales of Suspense was a smash hit and clocked in more female readers than ever before in the comic book medium. Fans of the character felt an immediate connection with a man who struggled with identity and commitment, and the notion of him sporting a wounded heart that required regulation by the famous arc reactor, which served as the backbone of the Iron Man armor, was a new twist on the comic book medium that struck a chord with readers old and young, and paved the way for his own series that began in May of 1968 with Iron Man number 1. In the comics, Tony Stark was born to parents Howard and Maria Stark in 1942 and displayed signs early on that he possessed a brilliant mind with a runaway mouth to match. During his youth, Stark demonstrated his wide array of genius with various scientific conquests, eventually earning him a spot on the MIT campus at the tender age of 15 to further enhance his skill set. These principles were held in place during the MCU adaptations, updating the date of Stark's parents' death to 1991, but maintaining his position of leadership of Stark Industries and his tutelage at MIT. Tony's drive to excel was done in the hopes of grabbing the attention of his somewhat absentee father, weapons developer and CEO of Stark Industries, Howard Stark, a plot device that served as the backbone for much of Tony's story arc in 2010's Iron Man 2. Howard worked tirelessly to provide Tony with a legacy, but it left Tony with a somewhat orphaned mindset as a result. When Maria and Howard are killed in a car wreck, Tony finds himself truly orphaned and closes himself off entirely from any kind of personal connections or relationships. It is the start of his playboy billionaire antics that would come to define him and create a cocoon around his heart for several years to come. For a man that was seemingly invulnerable on the outside, on the inside he was more wounded than he could bear to admit. Taking the reins of Stark Industries at 21, Tony fast-tracks the company and becomes the premier weapons manufacturer for the country, sometimes referred to as the Merchant of Death and the Da Vinci of our time in the MCU adaptation. Because of his warmongering tactics and strategies, Stark excelled at carrying on his father's legacy despite the personal toll it was taking on his soul. However, all of that changed when Stark is injured in the jungles of Vietnam and taken hostage by enemy forces led by warlord Wong Chu, later updated in 2008's Iron Man, the first movie of the MCU, by substituting Afghanistan for Vietnam and the character of Wong Chu for Raza and his terrorist group, the Ten Rings. Tony, wounded and on the brink of death, is ordered to build weapons under threat of his execution. However, Stark finds the injuries he sustained during his enslavement are severe, with shrapnel moving towards his heart at an alarming rate. During his enslavement, Tony confides in his fellow prisoner, Nobel Prize-winning physicist Ho Yinsen, and together they craft a magnetic chest plate in the hopes of preventing the shrapnel from entering into Tony's heart. Stark and Yinsen then set about crafting a suit of armor to aid in their retreat from the compound. After a harrowing escape, Yinsen is killed after sacrificing himself, and Tony seeks revenge on his captors before stumbling across wounded American pilot James Rhodey Rhodes, who would later on become one of Tony's closest friends and confidants. However, in the MCU adaptation, Rhodey is already a concrete member of Tony's entourage. He leads the search for Tony during his capture by Raza and the Ten Rings, and serves as a more level-minded confidant compared to Tony's dive-in head-first mentality. After returning home and finding himself thrust in the public spotlight, Stark learns that the shrapnel fragments in his chest cannot be removed, and is therefore forced to endure wearing the armor's chestplate beneath his clothes to serve as a regulator for his heart. A man formerly closed off from the world finds that he's physically and spiritually on the mend. It's a brilliant analogy for a character undergoing an evolution, with Tony Stark's story arc reminiscent of that of the metamorphosis of the caterpillar, if caterpillars had billions of dollars and a suit of armor, that is. Under public scrutiny after the world witnesses the birth of Iron Man, Stark informs the media and the general public that the suit is nothing more than a personal robotic bodyguard and the mascot of Stark Industries. This provides him with the perfect cover as he proceeds to change the course of Stark Industries' penchant from weapons manufacturing towards more philanthropic goals. Tony vows to use the weapons he once crafted for the means of destruction and turn them on anyone attempting to bring harm to others. With his cover securely in place, Tony sets about cementing his playboy industrialist attitude to further mislead the public that he's Iron Man. He then confides in two of his closest confidants, Harold Happy Hogan and his secretary, Virginia Pepper Potts, that he's indeed Iron Man, and utilizes his relationship with both to further enhance his quest for peace and stability. They, along with James Rhodes, assist Tony in his pursuit and become his greatest allies in his mission to rid the world of self-destruction and violence. As the comics and MCU films evolved from an anti-war and anti-communist stance commentary, but still preserving the core fundamentals of his origins, Tony's personal and political opinions are challenged, and his brash and headstrong attitude is called into question more than once. This hinders several of his personal relationships and sheds light on the fact that he, like all people, is still prone to change and betterment. Tony's genius is then applied to weapons development for S.H.I.E.L.D., where he becomes one of the point men for what would become the premier superhero team of all time, the Avengers. When it comes down to variations in wardrobe, no one does it better than Iron Man. With a long laundry list of opponents like Whiplash and Detroit Steel giving him a hard time, and being that Iron Man doesn't fit the traditional standard of superheroes, by this we mean he has no powers obviously, Tony Stark relies entirely on his engineering skills and constantly updating his tech to withstand toe-to-toe showdowns with the more superpower inclined characters like the Incredible Hulk.
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep.
Throughout the entire span of his existence, Iron Man has seen some astounding and impressive variations in his impenetrable suit of armor that has been improved and updated with optimum efficiency and maximum aesthetic flair. Relying on technology that may not yet be available to present-day people, the equipment that Iron Man utilizes is still a tangible and believable science that we're just a stone's throw away from actually acquiring. While the overall tone of Iron Man's armor has remained pretty much consistent since his somewhat humble beginnings in 1963, his design and weapon systems have seen more improvements on a day-to-day basis than the insufferable and seemingly never-ending upgrades to the iPhone. With 50 suits in total having been currently featured on the big screen, let's take a look at a few of the suits that have popped up throughout the MCU timeline. And please, try not to drool all over your keyboards while we do so. In the comics, the suits were designated as models and featured more jutted angles, and tended to take on a look closer resembling that of the human physique, such as his appearance in the 1976 issues, like the Model Thor. The look in the comics tended to adhere to the more classic superhero motif, including what looks like underoos in some of the models, and advanced towards the more traditional look of Iron Man around the 80s. In the films, and built from scraps found in a box, the brutalist look of the Mark I in 2008's Iron Man echoed what would turn into the more streamlined units to come throughout the MCU. While the Mark I suit lacked the more sophisticated armor and weapons that would be seen in later models, it was a formidable piece of equipment that started off Iron Man's run with a bang and a flamethrower. After successfully fleeing from captivity and back at home with his plethora of cash and toys, Tony Stark sets about building what would be recognized as the more traditional Iron Man armor, supposedly made from a nickel-titanium alloy called nitinol, a less on-the-nose decision that strayed from the original comics' iron-based material. After some hilarious antics of Tony calibrating the suit, the world, or Santa Monica to be more accurate, was exposed to the silver-plated wonder known as the Mark II. Vastly improving on the Mark I armor, the Mark II, a prototype testing suit, featured flaps and stabilizers that gave Iron Man the ability to fly. The new model also integrates Jarvis's AI systems, a key element to the suit that helps in saving Iron Man's metal butt on more than one occasion. A virtual Swiss Army knife, the suit also features what would become the iconic heads-up display, equipped with the world's best computer tech, including GPS navigation, advanced combat analysis, and a kick-ass rock playlist built right into the headset. With the well-known repulsors and unibeam serving as the basis for the weapons system, the Mark II would later serve as the foundation armor for Rhodey's suit, aka War Machine, when it's upgraded by Justin Hammer of Hammertech in Iron Man 2. Upon creation of the Mark III, complete with the classic hot rod red and gold finish, the official and classic look of Iron Man was in place. Between the resources of Stark Industries and a few from S.H.I.E.L.D. at his disposal, Tony's knack for extravagance and one-upmanship is wholly represented in some of his practical and not so practical creations. Once again, being that Iron Man doesn't rely on any type of superpower or spider bite to fuel his fight, the character integrates his vast knowledge of weaponry to continually progress and keep his systems 10 steps ahead of the competition. As the films advanced, and so did Tony Stark's ingenuity and knack for creating more compact and transportable iterations of the suit, we saw an impressive array of pieces ranging from the Mark V briefcase armor to the nanotechnology-based suit featured in Avengers Infinity War. With each suit created to fulfill a specific need or purpose, such as the Mark VI's palladium-free power source in Iron Man 2, the Mark X's flight focus build in Iron Man 3, and Mark 16's stealth capabilities, major and minor color and design tweaks are apparent in every model that TS has concocted, but still maintaining the iconic faceplate and overall look that fans know and love. With iconic weaponry such as the shoulder missiles on the Mark III and the 200 petawatt lasers seen on several of the suits, Iron Man's armor progressed into a combination that was both lethal and cutting edge. Sometimes questioning the limits of what he should do, Iron Man's weapons and gadgets grew more prominent and more powerful around the time of Iron Man 3. The oversized chest repulsors on the Mark 18 served as perfect examples of Iron Man's butt-busting capabilities, and the Mark 25's jackhammer hands were meant for building demolition and destruction, but mostly destruction. The suits also held an extensive and impressive range of abilities, including being able to withstand extreme temperatures, travel long distances, push the limits of altitude, and even the ability to blend into their environment like the Mark 27 armor. Around the time of Avengers Infinity War, the suit became a more fluid piece of equipment, relying on nanotechnology that, in a way, coated itself over Tony Stark's body rather than clad him in it. The suit becomes an integral and almost symbiotic piece of Tony's identity. Tony seems to always have some element of one of his suits within arm's reach throughout the later films, including sporting his arc reactor chest piece even after his heart condition is remedied. Impressive, genius, sleek, however you want to describe Iron Man's suits, it has always been a treat for audiences to witness the newest piece of Stark tech in both the comics and the films. There's never a dull moment present in the armor's progression and refinement, so fans will always find themselves on the edge of their seats in wide-eyed anticipation to see what new and innovative pieces will set fire to the screen. It's true when they say that heroes are only as good as their villains, and boy does Iron Man have a few. However, one of the recurring elements present throughout most of Iron Man's standalone adventures on the screen is the terrorist organization known as the Ten Rings. During his initial capture in the first film, the character crosses paths with Raza in Afghanistan, a slight adjustment on the original comic book villain known as Wong Chu, who he encounters in Vietnam. This starts a chain reaction of events that ends up leading to the reveal in Iron Man 3 of the nemesis in charge of the Ten Rings from the start, perhaps the most well-known of the villains in the Iron Man canon, known as the Mandarin. In the comics, the Mandarin is a seemingly supernatural force capable of superhuman strength and possesses special abilities on each of the 10 rings adorning his fingers. The Mandarin is unequivocally Iron Man's #1 opponent in the comics, with a wide-spanning storyline that has played on the page since 1964. With the more grounded and real-world inspired rules in place by the time the MCU arrived, however, the character of Mandarin is introduced in Iron Man 3 and adapted into a... Here we go. Theatre actor known as Trevor Slattery pretending to be the Mandarin while the character of Aldrich Killian goes about pulling the strings. Killian, a former think tank whiz who seeks to destroy the Iron Man legacy after being shunned by Tony Stark before the events of the first Iron Man, is the mastermind behind the Extremis program, first introduced in the 2005 6-issue series Extremis, that also served as a partial template for the Iron Man 3 script. The blueprint of Extremis in the films was approached in a slightly more comedic way that turned the source material on its head. It was a bold move the filmmakers rolled the dice on that still leaves some fans a little hot under the collar as a result, with all of us torn between laughing at Sir Kingsley's antics in Iron Man 3 and being a bit perturbed at the madness of it all. Along with the Mandarin, the standalone Iron Man MCU films featured several other well-known villains from the canon, most notably Ironmonger in the first Iron Man, and Whiplash, who was more of a hybrid of Whiplash and Crimson Dynamo from the comics in Iron Man 2. Along with the vodka-flavoured take on Whiplash, Tony Stark's longtime rival Justin Hammer, Americanized in the films, also makes an appearance in the second Iron Man film, with a slight adjustment in Hammer's age and a comedic flavouring brought to life by the versatile Sam Rockwell, that most of us couldn't help but relish. Ha! And that dance number of his is classic! Like the Hammer Whiplash plotline in Iron Man 2, the films made it a point to have several of the villains working hand in hand with one another, to pack as much punch into each narrative as possible, with slight twists on each character, while still toting their original DNA crafted by the comic book artists. Moving past the standalone films and into Avengers territory, Iron Man begins to share some of the same opposing forces as his fellow teammates, starting with the attack on New York under Loki's command in the Avengers, all the way up to the Mad Titan Thanos in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Allies, friends and family. All of these are an accurate summation of the sidekicks of Iron Man, with each one never short on heart and completely packed to the gills with character. The first of Tony's allies is showcased in the form of Virginia Pepper Potts, his personal assistant, eventual girlfriend, and one-time CEO of Stark Industries. In the comics, Pepper is quite similar to her on-screen representation played by Gwyneth Paltrow, right down to the character's overall appearance. At one point in the comic book storylines, Pepper dons the alter ego of Rescue after being given a suit of armor by Tony in the MCU adaptation. This played out in 2019's highly anticipated Avengers Endgame. Pepper's representations in the films do stray a bit from the comics and tend to keep her a little more grounded. Pepper's level-headed and emotionally sound mindset serves as an appropriate sounding board for the more brash and straight-to-the-point ego of Tony Stark, with Pepper tending to embody all the opposite mentalities and tics that Iron Man possesses, and serving as a huge catalyst for Iron Man's growth throughout the series. Along with Pepper, many of Iron Man's allies throughout the MCU films remain consistent. James Rhodey Rhodes, aka War Machine, is introduced as a longtime friend and colleague of Iron Man in the very beginning of the film, rather than by chance. Played by actor Terrence Howard in the first Iron Man movie and Don Cheadle in every other one,
Look, it's me. I'm here. Deal with it. Let's move on.
Rhodey, much like Pepper, tends to keep Iron Man in check during his more hot-headed, dive-in headfirst moments that pop up throughout the storyline, and serves as one of the best tag team partners when he dons the armor of War Machine during several of the film's climaxes. Unlike the comics, Rhodey advances straight to becoming War Machine by the second film, but in the source material, Rhodey actually becomes Iron Man for a short stint in Iron Man number 169. On the civilian front, one of Iron Man's closest confidants is that of Harold Happy Hogan, a former boxer and portrayed by Iron Man 1 and 2 director Jon Favreau. Happy doesn't rely on tech, powers or any kind of outside source for his strength, instead relying on brawn, humor and a big brother-little brother relationship with Tony Stark that serves as much needed alleviation during the more tense moments of the MCU films. When traveling into Avengers territory, Iron Man, although he's part of a team of people who always have each other's back, finds himself emotionally drawn to certain characters in the more intimate moments of the films that stand out amongst his other relationships. One of these relationships comes in the form of Dr. Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk, with Banner and Stark finding their shared knowledge of science a cornerstone of their relationship, and lending itself to several critical moments of decision-making that greatly assist the Avengers in saving the day. Along with Banner, Iron Man strikes up a notable kinship in the later films with the Tom Holland iteration of Spider-Man. It's a brilliant, humorous and touching father-son-like relationship, with Iron Man's role as a pseudo-mentor fulfilling Spider-Man's longing for a father, and Spider-Man's similar and youthful reflection of Tony Stark's humor and brilliance fulfilling the relationship Stark felt he never had with his father Howard. It's a stark contrast, pun intended, to the more cordial, friendly and less intimate relationship the two characters shared in the Avengers comics, which saw more of an advancement in 2005's The New Avengers. With an abundance of allies and friends at his side, Iron Man has seen massive intellectual and emotional growth throughout both the comics and the films with the relationships that he has formed, each character lending him perspective, guidance, and sometimes a shoulder to cry on. It almost goes without saying the type of cultural impact that Iron Man has had on all of us. Even with a concrete fan base already in place from the comic books, the love for Tony Stark and Iron Man has only grown tenfold since his debut in 2008, without any signs of fatigue. Amongst a canon of incredible and profoundly complex characters, the human qualities of Iron Man have kept audiences enthralled and inspired, without ever letting up since he first donned the Mark I in a cave with a guy named Yinsen. It's so easy to see the attraction of what draws people to Iron Man. Aside from the evident and eye-catching elements, it's his struggle for identity, his drive to do the right thing, his constant battle with his own ego and maintaining the positive and fulfilling relationships that have turned him into the man he is today. A man who was willing to sacrifice himself to save the world in Avengers Endgame. It's the story of all of us. Tony Stark, Iron Man, is the everyday people persona, despite the countless billions he possesses and the IQ that apparently no test can fully measure. The investment we have in the character of Iron Man indeed is a reflection of ourselves. Each time we sit down to see how things will pan out for one of our favourite MCU film heroes, we project our hopes and drives onto the steel-clad saviour. We crossed our fingers, clutched our popcorn, and hoped that, through all the chaos, the cool suits and the gut-busting one-liners, he made it through the other side in one piece. Or pieces, because there's quite a few of them attached to his body. The entire world was gutted when we saw him lose his life, but it was for the noblest of causes. His daughter Morgan would be proud. After all, there's a reason why she loves him 3000. The tale of Iron Man is one that was emotionally driven with each outing he embarked on. There's no doubt we'll look back at Iron Man's journey fondly. Captain America said Iron Man would never lay down on the wire and sacrifice himself for others, but he proved everyone wrong in the climax of Avengers Endgame. He was Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
So, what did you think about our take on the MCU adaptation of Iron Man? How well has Mr. Stark held up over the course of 10 years on the silver screen? Let us know what you think in the comment section below and click subscribe for more videos from us here at CBR. We'll see you soon.